to the moon. Don't leave so soon. Don't leave so soon. How can I get through? I wanna go to the moon. Don't leave so soon. Don't leave so soon. How can I get through? I wanna go to the moon. Don't leave so soon. Don't leave so soon. How can I get through?
What is your favorite movie? Is it Dune, Star Wars, or maybe Star Trek? Everything Everywhere All at Once, Back to the Future, or Inception? Either way, all those films and modern cinema in general couldn't exist without him, Georges Méliès. A lot of films visually quote his works. Martin Scorsese declared his love for him many times in Hugo. Charlie Chaplin called him the alchemist of light, and D.W. Griffiths said, "I owe everything to him." Terry Gilliam even called Méliès the first great movie buff. It's not surprising, seeing how Méliès literally created the sci-fi genre. Today, I will tell you how the legendary illusionist and experimentalist created his magnum opus, or the story of the creation of A Trip to the Moon. As wacky a genius as Méliès was, he couldn't have done what he did without those guys. Thomas Edison. Thomas Alva Edison was an American inventor and businessman, inventor of the phonograph, telegraph, and telephone, developer of one of the first commercially successful incandescent light bulbs. But more importantly, he, along with William Dixon, invented the kinetograph and kinetoscope. The Lumiere brothers. Louis-Jean and Auguste Louis-Marie Nicolas Lumiere looked at Edison's invention and decided to do something better. The Lumiere's first 50-second tapes laid foundation for a variety of cinematic genres, including documentaries such as Workers Exit the Lumiere Factory or Arrival of the Train at La Ciotat Station, as well as feature films, with the comedy The Wandering Man being a particular success with the public. Who is this Méliès? As an illusionist, he's been appearing since 1888 at his own theater, Robert Houdin, on the Grand Boulevard, not far from the Théâtre de Grand Opera. Méliès quickly became the most famous magician in France. Film historian Georges Seurat wrote that his work at the theater was characterized by the fact that it did not depend so much on the sets, costumes, and acting as on the actors' dexterity and technique. He drew his inspiration from actual events, from true or imagined journeys, from historical notes. He did not neglect either comic or tragic effect. On the ground floor of the theater building were offices rented by Antoine Lumiere, a Lyon photographic factory worker, the father of entrepreneurs Louis and Auguste. On 28 December 1895, George was personally invited by Antoine to attend the Lumiere brothers' first public screening, and he immediately became an ardent film buff. He later recalled that those present at the screening were utterly astounded by the possibilities of the spectacle. At the end of the performance, everyone was intoxicated, and everyone asked himself how he could achieve such results. Méliès offered to buy a camera projector designed by the Lumieres for 10,000 francs, but the brothers refused, because they wanted to maintain their monopoly on the attraction, believing that it would soon go out of fashion and should try to capitalize on it while the public still has an interest in the novelty. Méliès later recalled, "We left impressed but also disappointed because we immediately realized what enriched possibilities lay in this new discovery." However, Méliès did not despair for long, and a few months after the historic session, he found an opportunity to purchase a similar machine made in England and began actively experimenting with it. Thus, in early 1896, Méliès learned that the optician Robert William Paul sells filming apparatus of his own design for 1,000 francs, and acquired one of them. Beginning in March 1896, he showed Paul's films and Thomas Edison's kinetoscope tapes in his theater. Paul's apparatus had several serious drawbacks. It often broke down, ripped and jammed the film, was heavy and clumsy, and very noisy. Using his engineering skills, Méliès made some improvements to the machine. Due to the fact that there are very poor quality films in public domain, he started his own production of pictures, and their subsequent sale. In 1896, Méliès used Paul machines to film his first tape, reproducing the original Lumiere part of a card game, Arrival, the train station Joinville, and Polyvalure. The fucker literally did remakes before it was mainstream. Méliès made commissioned and promotional films, and also pseudo-chronicles, which were staged plots reproducing real events. For example, his short films, Dreyfus Affair, Coronation of Edward VII, and others are well known. The film dedicated to Edward VII's coronation was commissioned by Charles Urban. One Parisian critic called the picture a hideous fake, but one cannot agree with such an opinion, as its authors never passed it off as a documentary. Méliès is also known for his experiments, for example, his film Four Troublesome Heads, in which he repeatedly exposes objects against a black background on film, a special effect that Méliès will later make extensive use of. This is, incidentally, the first case of Méliès shooting living heads or other body parts separate from the rest of the body, which became his favorite motif. Here, the trick was realized with the splicement and replacement of 4 separate exposures. His longest film at the time was inspired by 3 novels, and took 3 months and 10,000 francs to shoot. The plot of A Trip to the Moon is relatively simple but incredibly ambitious for early cinema. It tells the story of a professor whose name I'm not even gonna attempt to name, played by Méliès himself, president of the Astronomers Club. The professor and 5 of his astronomer friends travel to the moon in a spaceship they have built in their laboratory. They crash into the face of the moon, and once there, the men fall asleep. But they're captured by a group of lunar aliens, played by real acrobats, and they manage to escape with aliens in hot pursuit, after which they fall to the earth and land in the ocean. Dragged ashore, the returning explorers are celebrated by townsfolk. A Trip to the Moon was a challenge for Méliès, as it was his longest film at the time, about 8 to 12 minutes in various versions, with a relatively large budget, lots of theatrical pomp and special effects. He shot it in a studio in Monterey, which had a greenhouse that allowed him to use natural light. In fact, part of the ceiling appears in the film itself when the capsule is built. There were color prints, handmade no less, of this film, as well as black and white, certainly the standard of the time. The actors were often anonymous at the time, but Méliès did play the professor. The themes of discovery, exploration, and otherworldly adventures in the film, as well as a strong emphasis on storytelling, are why it is considered the first science fiction film of all time. And speaking of the film, it is impossible not to mention the satirical tone of it. The scientists are more like magicians. The professor literally draws the Earth and the Moon as a capsule in its trajectory. There is not even a single formula there. The themes of the film come from exploration of space worlds unknown to social commentary on colonization. Explorers arrive on a new world where they kill some natives and then take one back as a slave, and in doing so, the audience treats them like heroes. In 1908, Spanish director Segundo de Chimone essentially made an almost shot-for-shot remake with Excursion to the Moon. Bearing a few minor changes, it's literally the same film. Film piracy also damaged Méliès' career when companies such as the Edison Manufacturing Company and Vitagraph distributed illegal copies around the US, which subsequently damaged Méliès' profits and led to his eventual bankruptcy. After Méliès retired, the first science fiction film almost faded into obscurity, but in the 1930s there was a resurgence of interest among film enthusiasts. Since then, the film and its depictions, especially the scene where the capsule lands in man's eye on the moon, have continued to appear in pop culture. There are so many examples of portrayals of the moon being intelligent and male that I can't name all of them. Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey and Martin Scorsese's Hugo, just to name a few. Overall, A Trip to the Moon is definitely worth the short time spent watching it. I mean, the film has a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's the first sci-fi film ever made, and it's influenced everything that followed it. It's a short creative sci-fi film made by one of the pioneers of filmmaking, putting the viewer in context with the times in which it was made. I definitely recommend watching this film at least to understand where cinema begun.